The Trump transition team has spent the last week assembling names, looking at resumes, trying to prepare to fill out the roster for the president's cabinet. And now billionaire investor Carl Icahn says the president-elect has two prominent businessmen under consideration for two very important cabinet posts. Here's what Icahn has tweeted out. Spoke to Donald Trump. Steve Mnuchin and Wilbur Ross are being considered for Treasury and Commerce. Both would be great choices. Both are good friends of mine, but more importantly, they are two of the smartest people I know. High praise for both gentlemen, and we have the opportunity to visit with Wilbur Ross, one of America's foremost private equity investors and a senior policy advisor to Donald Trump. He joins us tonight from Newsmax, New York. Wilbur, it is great that you could make some time for us again here on Newsmax Prime. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Now, we saw what Carl Icahn tweeted out. Do you want to make some news tonight? Are you the leading candidate for the Commerce Secretary job? And have you spoken with Mr. Trump about that post?
I really think you ought to refer those questions to either Carl Icahn or to the president-elect.
Well, we can understand the diplomacy, the protocol, and the necessity of referring those questions. So we will take that as your opportunity to be discreet, to be diplomatic, and to pass on making news of that type tonight, which is altogether understandable because it's manners and it's protocol, and you are a very polite gentleman. Now, the difference between our last conversation, Wilbur, and the chance to visit with you right now is the fact that the last time we talked, you were involved in advising a campaign. Now that Mr. Trump has been elected, your insights may help us understand better what is in store economically, because obviously Mr. Trump, as really one of the cornerstones of his economic policy, says we have to cut the corporate tax rate. He says that will create more jobs and boost the economy. Tell us why a cut in the corporate tax rate will lead to economic growth and is desirable by the lights of the Trump administration.
Surely. Well, it's not just the tax cut, although gosh knows that's important enough. The tax cut from 35% maximum rate to 15% maximum rate in plain English means that anybody who's paying the full tax now as a business will get an immediate 30% boost to post-tax earnings. Very few companies have earnings growth of 30% in a year, so that's a wonderful thing, and it's a permanent thing. Second, and probably at least as importantly, companies now would have the option of either immediately writing off their capital expenditures, including software, or writing off the interest expense. The idea of giving that choice is not particularly to help the leverage buyouts, but rather to help foster capital investment. Capital investment by corporations has been one of the big laggards in the recent, very mild, weak recovery.
Now, Wilbur, you know what the left will counter with. We used to hear this all the time during the Reagan years. Oh, it's trickle-down economics. They use it to deride the plan and try to scare some people. Why are they wrong to use the catcall of trickle-down?
Well, whatever the catcall they use, the fact is that corporate spending has been lagging. The fact is this will improve it. And other aspects of the Trump plan will also help. His reduction in the exit tax for earnings that have been accumulated abroad, cutting that down to 10% from what would have been the 35%, will bring capital back, and that will ultimately be invested here. But it isn't just tax, it's also people's tax. Every single category of wage earner, with one or two little fluky anomalies that'll be dealt with in the final legislation, gets a reduction. A married couple with 2 children and a nanny earning $50,000 a year will get more than a 35% reduction. Same couple, same number of children, having a nanny, earning $75,000 will get a little over a 30% reduction. Same family structure, earning $5 million a year will get around a 3% reduction. So it's a very progressive thing in the sense that the least percentage benefit goes to the higher bracket and the highest percentage benefit goes to the lower brackets. And that's important because the propensity to spend is much higher in the lower brackets, which in plain English means they'll be buying things, and that in turn will stimulate the economy.
Love
Beyond
that plain
that,
English,
he's gonna-
Wilbur. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, beyond that, he will deregulate. We estimate that regulation costs this country $2 trillion a year. Just cutting out 10% of that would be $200 billion a year, and after the president-elect's proposed tax rate of 15%, that would create about $170 billion after-tax earnings for American companies. Again, that's money that will either be paid out in dividends or more likely mostly reinvested. Beyond that, it'll make corporate decisions easier, faster, and more effective. Overregulation has been a terrible, terrible burden, and even the Obama administration admits that it's $1.7 trillion. So whether it's 1.7 or 2, it's not the big deal. Big deal is it's going to be cut. Trade balance. We run a $500 billion a year trade deficit with the rest of the world.
And to that
The
point,
rest of the
Wilbur,
world-
if I could just jump in, because as you know, as the president-elect has laid out this very inviting lowering of the corporate tax rate, still we understand that Ford plans to assemble all of its compact cars down in Mexico. And the Ford CEO, Frank Fields, has said this about a possible tariff. A tariff like that would be imposed on the entire auto sector, and that could have a huge impact on the U.S. economy. Now, to be fair about this, Wilbur, just as you mentioned the fact that that over-regulation can be almost a hidden tax, there are those who are concerned that a tariff, in effect, will be another tax on the American people. Last night, Yaron Brooks of the Ayn Rand Institute was on this program. Here is what he had to say. Let's listen to him and then get your reaction to his thoughts.
Leave inputs alone. We want inputs. Inputs are good for the economy. The whole idea that imports are bad and exports are good is a mercantilist pre-Adam Smith Wealth of Nations theory of economics. It's completely and utterly ignorant. What we want is lower tariffs. What we want is more imports and more exports. If you want to make America competitive, you have to increase productivity. The way to increase productivity is to lower regulations and lower taxes.
So with a couple of minutes left, Wilbur, your response to what Yaron Brooks offered from the Ayn Rand Institute there concerning tariffs.
Well, if he thinks that imports are good and exports are not important, then he ought to explain to me why it is that China has created so much wealth for its citizens and has had the fastest growing economy built on net exports.
And it's a very valid point. There is another factor at work in our economy, and that, of course, is the money supply. The president-elect has argued in the past that the Fed has kept interest rates too low for too long. And I'm just interested, what would happen were the Fed to raise interest rates? There are concerns about that. Address that, if you would, please, sir, in the minute that remains.
Well, I think that the rates will go up in December. I can't judge whether the dawdling that they did was politically motivated or not, but whatever the motivations, it was wrong. If the only thing that keeps our economy together is 0.25% on interest rates, then we got nothing going for us anyway. I think that's a joke. And I think that they have created more problem by vacillating on interest rates, by creating uncertainty in the markets, than they would have created by raising the rates. So I believe that they will raise the rates the next time around, and I believe they should.
Wilbur
Their
Ross,
toolbox
we
is out of
really
tools.
appreciate your time, sir, because as you talk about interest rates, we'd be remiss if we didn't point out there is a lot of interest in your immediate future. You have been mentioned as the possible Secretary of Commerce in the Trump administration. We will see if that comes to pass. But whatever the future, sir, we hope you will we hope you will join us again here on Newsmax Prime. Now, still ahead, you have an Android phone. Your text messages might be going to China.